We are live here on the Secrets of Success podcast with Dr. Shane Needham, where our theme is never be outworked. And I have a great colleague and a friend of mine, Jan, on the line. She's all the way from New Jersey. We know that's kind of the epicenter of COVID-19. And for the next couple of weeks, we're going to have some awesome scientists on board and on this show. And I am so excited about that. And one of the first ones is Jan. We've had a few scientists already, but at the same time, we talk about those things about never be outworked. And Jan is a great example of a scientist, but also an entrepreneur, and she fits that mindset of never be outworked. We'll hear a little bit about her story. Thank you for joining us. I'm super excited about the day-to-day because for so many reasons, not only to have Jan on, but also to talk about the quarantine, COVID-19, and she'll talk about how they're still locked down in New Jersey and there's no phase one or anything. They're not opening up at all. And a lot of laboratories are in a similar state. But can we work remotely and virtually, so to speak? And she sets up systems to do that. So she's going to talk about that. So, by the way, follow me on Facebook, on LinkedIn, on Instagram. Visit my website at drsneedham.com. See me on my YouTube channel, my Spotify channel, on iTunes with my podcast, and also on SoundCloud. We are taking callers today. So if you want to call in, one of the passions that maybe non-scientists will be interested in is blockchain currency. And Jan and I were talking about that yesterday, and she educated me on this. And, it's a very interesting topic. We've heard of cryptocurrency and Bitcoin, and with all the government spending around the world, it's a very interesting topic, and how that can actually lower healthcare costs. And so it's very, very interesting. So for those non-scientists, hey, if you're a scientist, call in as well. And I hope we have colleagues from all over the world watching us, but you can call in and ask questions. We'll take your calls at 877-995-2111. Again, 877-995-2111. And for the next couple of weeks, we're going to be talking about science. We're going to be talking about things like, and we're sometimes going to use words that maybe not everybody understands, and it's our job as scientists to educate them. One of the reasons I started this podcast, I am a scientist myself. I own a pharmaceutical testing laboratory, and so I've always been involved in marketing and sales, the entrepreneurial side of it, but also the science part of it. And so, and as a scientist, I have a PhD in chemistry. I realized once I started a business that scientists are absolutely trained to be conservative and skeptical, and that's okay. Don't get me wrong. That's good. Okay. That's what we're supposed to do, is we're supposed to not answer the question yes in science, but we're supposed to more like say, I don't think that could happen, and why. Okay. So why is this podcast important? Because right now, how we disseminate scientific information is like this. We do a validation and we do experiments in the laboratory. We come up with a hypothesis. We do experiments, and then we have a conclusion. That takes months. Then we write up a paper. That takes more months. Then we submit that paper to a journal or to a conference. That has to be reviewed before it gets accepted. That takes more months. And then we get it published if that's possible. Well, here's the problem in today's world. That is old news. That is old news. That's the old way of doing things. I'm actually involved in a conference that I've been involved at, CPSA Europe, for several years in a row now. And we talk about what is the new way to disseminate scientific information. And the new way is social media. And I am glad to be one of the first ones to do that live, where we can start talking about science. We're going to talk about other things as well. But for the next couple of weeks, let me talk about this. Entrepreneur and scientist Jan, we're going to have to talk about remote lab operations. Next week, we're going to have somebody talking about metabolome. The week after that, we're going to have some scientists with PhDs talking about emotional intelligence. After that, I'm super excited to announce a vice president from a major company, scientific company, is going to be on the show. And he's going to be talking about just what they're doing for precision medicine to take our society from sick care to well care. It's a passion of mine. So thank you very much for watching. So Jan, I want to hear about you. Introduce yourself. Tell us where you're at, where you're from. Tell us your story. We'll talk a little bit about how we met. And I actually just Jan told me this story yesterday, and I was floored and honored for her words. And so, Jan, tell us about yourself.
Yeah, well, it was quite an honor to be here. Thank you so much for allowing me to share my thoughts on digital operations. But I have to say that I'm extremely impressed by you from the first moment I met you. Great, just great person to talk to, great entrepreneur, investor. And I have to say that I love what you're doing here. I mean, it's so necessary to have a place that we could go to for certainty of information, to go through this transition of a period of uncertainty. And I have to say that I've been so overwhelmed by the amount of data that's been coming out ever since this pandemic, the news, the fake news, the numbers and data points. And it's just overwhelming to know like where to turn to, what can you really trust, right? And so to have a place that you could go to, that the information is vetted, and from people you trust is just so valuable. So, thank you for doing this. It's really a wonderful thing.
Thank you.
So a little bit about me. As you probably could tell from my accent, born and raised in New York City. My dad was a he was a cosmetic chemist, and he used to come home with all these potions and concoctions for us to try out. And I thought being a scientist was the best thing since sliced bread. So, from a very early age, I just wanted to go into that field. And, fast forward, I went to Queens College and City University. I got a dual master's degree in chemistry and mathematics. And I ended up in the pharmaceutical industry and lab services and bioanalytical chemistry, just as you. And just for the sake of the audience, knowing a little bit about bioanalytical chemistry, because there's so many disciplines that come into the mix in developing a drug. And what biochemistry is all about is, developing assays to measure the drug and biological fluids and tissues. And the reason why that's important, it provides the labeling. So when you look at your medication and you see that you have to take this 2 tablets 3 times a day. Can you take it with food or empty stomach? What other medications can you take with it? I mean, this is the data that we're providing to provide that label. So it's really good to, have that context of what we're doing here in the laboratory.
Excellent point, Jan. I think that's excellent. And, sometimes, Jan, as scientists, we just kind of go off on tangents and we say a lot of words that some people won't understand. So let's go over that again. Bioanalysis. That's what I do. I'm an analytical chemist. I'm a bioanalytical chemist. That's the type of laboratory I own as well. And Jan works in that field as well and supports that field. And again, that is the measurement of therapeutics or drugs and their metabolites or drugs and their products from biological fluids. And that could be blood, urine, synovial fluid, hair. Mm-hmm. I mean, all kinds of different biological matrices, but it does. That's what I like about our industry is that
very exciting area.
Yeah, it is. It's not only fun for an analytical chemist. It's really fun. I love looking at new molecules and developing new methods, but it's also part of curing disease. I mean, cancers and so on and so forth. We work in those things, those areas. Obviously, labs like ours right now, they are examples of labs like ours are setting up tests to do COVID-19 testing and to test people's blood. And so very, very similar. And it's just really, really cool stuff. So thanks for that, Jan. So go on, keep going.
Yeah. So, so I started in the bioanalytical area, and it was a very exciting time because the focus was on front-end automation. And what does that mean is, how do we go from processing one sample at a time to batches of samples? And we were pretty much in the forefront of implementing the 96-well technology and did it very successfully. And so, we solved that problem, analyzing lots of samples, but then that created a new problem. And that new problem was, how do you handle all the data that was being generated? And now I'm going to show my age a little bit, because there's data acquisition systems that now target this type of data collection. And they're known as LIMS, Laboratory Information Management Systems, ELNs, electronic notebooks. But that was a time when these systems were not were not commonplace at the laboratory at that time. So I spent a lot of focus, creating Visual Basic macros and solutions and tools to grab the data from the instrument, collate it, analyze it. It had embedded edit checks, and be able to summarize the results and create, tables and listings for reports. So now we solved problem number one, we solved problem number two. Now we're chucking away as a laboratory and generating a lot of data, analyzing lots of samples. And then problem number three popped up, and that was how to handle all these projects. It was just overwhelming. So, having a centralized place of where all the, your list of projects, activities, milestones, commitment dates, how do we schedule people and equipment, and how do we even forecast how many people by skill sets to support your portfolio? So these were challenging questions, and it was, kind of a different angle, because up until now, scientists were only concerned with the data, the scientific data, and this is now looking at the operations. So it was a pretty exciting field. And, we created a lot of very good tools in the laboratory, and that started percolating up through the organization and met the interest in senior management and clinical. And so I was asked at that time, would I consider going to clinical and start developing those tools for the clinical arena, which, they were saddled with the use of spreadsheets. And if you imagine, tracking a clinical trial with all the different attributes of that trial on spreadsheets, it's fine when things go to plan, but things rarely go to plan. So it was, how can we figure out the underlying root cause of what's going on with, managing spreadsheets? So that was, the key issue. And, it was a difficult time, because when I talk about the lab started with me and one instrument. And at the time, this decision was a decision point. We were like 75 scientists and 35 instruments. So it was almost like my baby that I grew. But I was, it was running independently, and I was, keen for a new challenge. And I have to say, going into clinical, you take the bio-analytical problem and times that by 100. It was so much more complex of a data landscape. Yeah. And, there's not only internal data, but external. You're running global trials all around the world, and each one of those clinical sites are producing data. You have CROs, managing those trials. So how are you going to get all this data in an automatic fashion, to the forefront, so that the study manager could go to their desktop, whether that desktop is in their office, at home, or in travels, that they could get access to this information. And it was really a hard, kind of problem to solve. And I thought to myself, this is really an area to innovate, right? Because when you look at other industries, they were able to really take hold of their data, to process it rapidly, to report on it, and even use it as triggering devices. And, I'm kind of scratching my head, like, why has it been so complicated for pharma to invoke some of this innovation? And, at that time, I was 20 years in the industry, and I saw so much investment in technology. And I think, I think on average, pharma R&D spends about $2 billion a year on technology. So when you look across a decade, that's $20 billion. And you have to ask yourself, what did we really get from that, right?
Sure.
Did we accelerate the drug development process? Do we understand the pharmacology of predictive models? Did we improve the business of science? And I have to say, no, on all fronts. I mean,
I know
right?
what you're saying. And I think, I think the number one thing is, have we improved the health of the patient? And that's really the end goal, and getting a therapeutic to the market as soon as
Faster.
possible.
Yeah. All right.
These are all questions, Jan. It's like, I don't have the answers to those either. That it's a challenge, because it's more and more difficult to develop new therapeutics. And, Jan brings up some very good points. And, the one thing that she was talking about is, automating these processes and how important they are, and then creating all this data. And I'm not sure, Jan, if we can ever solve the problem. One of my colleagues, I can't remember who it was, a long time ago said that the problem is paralysis by analysis.
Right.
We create so much data that sometimes we don't know what to do with it. And do you agree that we're always going to be creating more data than we can actually realistically
Consume.
analyze?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. And that was the key problem with this exercise, because there was so much data, but what really was the important data points that we need to connect? And let's develop a story on the interesting use. So it's not about data management, let's say. It's about we grab the data, and then what interesting things can we do with that data? So so that's a very important concept that you bring up. So, continuing on, so this was a very complicated project, and I looked to other industries to see, what their solutions. And we, as a pharma industry, we were so set on on-prem solutions, big enterprise-wide deployments of Oracle, SAP, and I knew at that moment that, having remote access to data was so critical, and to enable that, that means we have to have a discussion of going to the cloud. And so, like, having those discussions, you might as well talk about the boogeyman, because it was really very non-receptive at that point. But we're able to position it that we're not dealing with sensitive clinical data. This is operational metric data. So it was okay, as a proof of concept, to go to the cloud. And it was highly successful. I was able, to my surprise, there were so many tools that were available that were so cost effective that you can implement using software as a service business model. And I tried to get a lot of gig workers, gig programmers to move, because all we're talking about is moving data from point A to point B in automation. So there's plenty of people that could do that type of work. And, we were able to create such a powerful tool with a shoestring budget and just very limited time. And we were grabbing data across the world from many different sites, from many different portals, and surfacing it up in near real time to the study managers via their browser. So just log on to any computer and get access to this. So I was just so excited about what we did and created, and I wanted to kind of shout it from the rooftops to industry to see, like, you didn't have to make these big investments in data warehouses, and look what you can do. And I got overwhelmed by the response when I was talking about, these tools that we were developing.
And this was when you were still
Still in
working
pharma.
still in pharma.
Still in pharma, just explaining this. And I got, so everybody was like, you should start your own business. We need your help, start your own business. And when you hear it a couple of dozen times, it's like, okay, I think it's time to start my own business. So that was the catalyst for it. And we formed Metrendalytics in 2014. We had clients right from the start, which was pretty amazing as starting a new business. And it's so much, there's so much value that you could get with your data when you have the proper analytics behind it. And when you think of the data flow, I think what we bring to the table is that it's very hard to develop technologies with an IT mindset, right? You really need to have the business owner that drives that process, that has that domain knowledge, that knows how the data flows and how it's going to be used and how you should interact with the user interface.
Yeah.
So, I think that was really what propelled our success in key areas. And in the beginning, we were 50-50 in clinical and the labs. But I have to say the last 2 years, we're pretty much almost solely focused in the laboratory, because it still remains to be a technology cap, where in clinical there are solutions that are being developed that does similar things.
But, so a couple of things that Jan talked about that I want to just kind of reiterate. You're doing a great job describing this, and I just want to make sure that our listeners understand this too. So when she talks about the cloud, especially when you have confidential information or proprietary information or intellectual property, anybody in any company around the world, or even a single individual that has that kind of property, is very, let's see, unwilling to put that in the cloud for potential security risks.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but you can't work remotely, and
Mm-hmm.
if you don't put things in the cloud. And so Jan came up with some tools at Metrendalytics that she started, the company that she started, to say, hey, we have a better solution, and it is in the cloud. And here's what I found too, as far as not only when I worked for Pfizer, but now that I have my own company, is that there are going to be lots of off the shelf tools, like I think you even described one, Oracle. There's probably some other systems that you can buy that are going to be one size fits all solutions. Those never work.
Mm-hmm.
Those never work. And what the important part of what Jan is saying is, because those are developed by IT people that are not looking at specific applications and specific needs. That's my opinion. Okay.
Right.
What Jan developed is she comes out of the lab as a scientist. She says, these are our needs. And she had an IT background, so she could develop these applications herself. And she knew exactly what was needed. That's the solutions we need. Because believe me, I know many organizations that have spent millions of dollars in investing in one size fits all solutions, and they actually don't work at the single point level. They don't. So people
No.
don't use them. People don't
Yep.
use them. And so what Jan has developed is a system where you can collect data and have everything in one place instead of looking at 300 different Excel spreadsheets or writing down a list of it and so on and so forth. And do you know how important that is? Because now you can find all your information in one place. Sometimes you would spend hours looking for a piece of data, and now it's in one place. So it's improved the efficiency and productivity in my lab just greatly. So I'm very happy about that. So thank you, Jan. So I just kind of want to reiterate that. Now, I want to go on to this because I love being an entrepreneur. I love in my life to be able to get a reward for the risks that I get. And Jan's story, what really attracted me to her and her story, and when we first met and connected, was that she is absolutely living the American dream. And I will absolutely say and be proud of, I'm living that too. I'm proud to say that. I'm proud of her for living that American dream. And it's exciting. Listen to what it was right there. She was working. She saw a need. And so she went and created her own thing that she sets a price for and people are willing to pay for. And that is capitalism. And that is awesome. Tell me about that first step of you saying, hey, you're getting feedback and yeah, I think I could do this. Tell me about that. Tell me about, were you afraid? How'd you start? Did you have a business plan? How did you finance it? All those things.
Yeah, it was overwhelming at first, but I just had so much passion. You really do need to have that passion. And there was nothing that was going to stop me. As I said, because I had went out to the industry, I talked about this, and being in the industry for so many years was a good thing, because now I'm at a point where my colleagues and friends are decision makers, and they knew my history in the pharma industry as getting things done. And so it was pretty easy move to trust me. And that's to see me as a vendor, but a trusted partner to develop these things together. And it was a former colleague in the laboratory space that said, hey, did you ever think about developing this type of tool for the laboratory? And that's how we began. And I was like, it hadn't changed, Shane. I hadn't been out of the lab for 10 years and things hadn't changed. And so
I get it. You're still using Excel spreadsheets to track. And it was just
and we're going to labs now and it's still the same, and it's still the same areas of inefficiency. And
I'm like,
amazing.
I always say these to people, like, this is the famous quote that only entrepreneurs sometimes, or people that are very innovative, or people who are disruptors. And I think Jan's a disruptor. I am too. You can like it or not, but I like to change things to make things better. Sometimes that upsets people. I do think that also creates a lot of innovation to improve things in the world. But the famous quote that I hear is, well, why do we do it this way? And the famous line is, well, we've always done it that way.
Yeah.
Oh my, this is 2020. There is a better way to do this, right? So
Yeah.
I want to hear that story, keep being an entrepreneur, did you have a business plan? Were you
So
afraid?
I didn't really even need to put together a business plan. I didn't need financing because, the first customers that we had were really the seed of the business, right?
Awesome.
So it was tremendously easy and it was nothing that I had to buy. We're selling software as a service. So if I go to a company that's interested in our product, we set up a realm in their name. They get the platform, and then we go in and develop the applications for them, and then they own it, which is a very different model from any other software. So there's no perpetual license. You take ownership of that, and you could elect to keep us maintaining the product, or you could develop a group internally to maintain it. And this is why I like these more modern platforms, because it empowers that citizen developer. So you could have a person in your organization that could really, be the admin for the system, and you don't have to depend on the developer really. So we're just there to facilitate the applications needed, the flow of information throughout your operations, and for the end product.
Yeah. I want to focus on your story. I give quite a few presentations, and I'm asked to speak as an entrepreneur and scientist and so on and so forth at local organizations, and regional and actually global organizations, and including universities. And one of the things that universities teach a lot of times,
Mhm.
and it's the current model of entrepreneurship, is here's how you're an entrepreneur. And Jen, I love your story, by the way. I love
Mhm.
it because I think you did it the right way. And I'm not saying there's a right or wrong way to be an entrepreneur, but we know this: in free market capitalism, a person or people, a group of people, see a need and they think that they can make a product or a service that people will purchase.
Mhm.
Okay. So you start it that way, but you
Mhm.
work in the industry first. You
Mhm.
get experience. You're creating potential clientele already, right? And the decision makers. So you're already doing marketing right there, right? And then you start your product. You have a client already or your service, and you're purchased. No financing necessary, so on and so forth. And so I think that's the way to do it. And you have lots of skin in the game, right? Because you had to take a risk.
Yeah.
So
I
that's
left
the
a
way to
very
do it.
comfortable farmer job to do this. And, and it's not even that we were even doing marketing anymore, because our clients are our marketers. They're going out and talking about the platforms. And yeah,
Well,
so
guess what, Jan? You're doing marketing right now. You're
yes.
doing an awesome job at it. So how entrepreneurship is actually taught a lot of times now, and you can see this in universities and organizations, is it's taught that you have this idea. It's a disrupting, innovative idea that may have never even, there's no market demographic necessarily for it, and you haven't really done that research yet. And then you have this idea, and then you go out and you get a lot of funding from venture capitalists or somebody else, and
Mhm.
you pay yourself lots of money, and you may or may not have a product, and then you start doing your marketing and all those things, and it's usually done without having previous industry experience, and that's just not the way that I think is a successful way. Yes, those are the Facebook people, those are the Google people. I'm not saying that can't work once in a while, but the real American dream, the more common American dream, is exactly what Jan did. And she saw a need. She was working. She saw a need in it. That's why I left Pfizer. I was like, wait a minute. I was seeing all these issues with laboratories
Exactly. Yeah.
and contract research organizations, and they couldn't do method development as well. They didn't have the scientific knowledge. They didn't have the passion. I'm like, wait a minute. I could start my own thing and do this. And that's what I did.
Well, that's what
So
they say. The best business ideas comes from your own bad experience, right? And that's exactly the truth.
I like that. I really like that. That's true, because we see a bad experience. It's like, I know we can do better. And that's what you did.
Yeah.
You're seeing all these challenges, and it's like, we can fix this. So I think it's a great story. It really, really is. And so kudos to you, and really good job. And I think you've done a fabulous job at Metrendalytics. So really, really good job. I want it because we kind of skipped something. So we're going to come back to it, because I think Jan is, I'm actually really into like Myers-Briggs personalities and stuff. So I could probably tell you what she is, even without knowing what she is, but I know she's a good leader. And so I want to talk a little bit about leadership, because Jan told me something yesterday that man, I must say it made me, I always question myself as a leader. And you know what? I'm sure other people do too. And that's okay. And Jan said something to me yesterday that I still was thinking about when I was lying in bed last night. And I was so thankful for the comment that she said. So can you describe a little bit about how we first met and our first interactions, Jan, and just kind of that interaction between me and you and our communication?
Yeah, yeah, it was very memorable. I bring it up quite often. Uh, here I am promoting our applications and the value that we could bring to the bioanalytical lab. And I was invited into your laboratory to put together a proposal, speak to our people, see what they are needing, how does the data flow, what tools that they're using. And I'd like to, get your thoughts on what types of integrated applications that you could develop and give value to our operations. So got that information, developed some prototypes, put together, I thought, a really great presentation. Shane was invited, and I'm going through, and I thought I home run, and we were all looking to him to get his feedback on the next steps. And he looked at me and said, Jan, you seem like a very nice person and you have a wonderful product. But I can't tell you how many vendors come in here all the time saying that their product is going to save the world for me. And quite frankly, it doesn't. I waste time, I waste money, and I waste personal effort. And you also you also highlighted a recent experience, and I'm just thinking gosh, this is going terribly wrong. That's not at all how I envisioned it. But then you turned around and said, but my people feel very different, and they think that this is a good tool, and we need to implement this because it's exactly what we need. And I'm going to support my people moving forward and, approve of this product. And so I was just blown away from so many fronts, that that's leadership right there, right? That's
Well,
leadership. And it
yeah.
was really a lot of respect to support your people like that.
Thank you, Jan. And it turned into a great collaboration. And we have published on this. This is all public knowledge. It's all public information. We've published on it in Bioanalysis Zone, and I've given talks at several global conferences, and it's been a great collaboration with Jan. And I think she's a great leader as well. And so I want her to talk a little bit about that before we actually moved on. And I do remember that conversation and then other conversations after that. And it's just been I just knew that I wanted to get to know Jan more. I mean, we call this the proximity principle. My brother uses that term a lot. I see he's actually online watching as well. So thumbs up to you, Sean. But it's a proximity principle that you just connect with certain people. And I knew Jan had something in her that I wanted to know more about. And obviously she has an entrepreneurial mindset. She is very driven. She wants to never be outworked, and she's a scientist. So we have so many things in common, and I've just appreciated that. And so tell me about how leadership in your organization, how that works. And then we'll get on to remote lab operations during COVID-19 and how important that's been, and so on and so forth.
So leadership with me is really getting the team, the right people around you. So I think it's very important to surround yourself with extremely intelligent people. And, here I am, looking to start this company, and I was able to find like-minded scientists such as myself that really wanted to come together and create good tools for the industry. And so we all believe in the same vision. So I think we all have that same view of where we want to get to, and also adaptive. And I think you really have to not be fixed in mindset. You always have to listen to your customers. You have to always, think of different approaches to tackling problems. And leadership is gaining that trust, really. And I think what works for me as a business is simple things like being very responsive, being a friend, somebody that that is more of a trusted colleague than a vendor. And I think that's leadership, just
Well,
having a positive attitude.
Well, I always have 1-minute clips to advertise after we promote to promote these videos. You just had a 1-minute awesome clip on leadership. So that's going to be the one that we actually show and record and show the clips on LinkedIn and Facebook. So that was awesome. And one of the things that Jan has that I am also fascinated by trying to read people. And I think leadership is trying to read people. I'm actually not very good at it. I don't actually have a good intuition on reading people. And I actually think, this is just me. Okay, this is my opinion. Women are usually a lot better at it than me. So I actually have a lot of women colleagues and friends now that I go to them for intuition. I ask them, and they're like, "Yeah, that doesn't seem right," or "Yeah, that seems right." But one thing Jan has that I think, and we're going to be talking about this next week, and it's part of emotional intelligence and leadership is, or excuse me, in 2 weeks we're going to be talking about it. Is she has empathy. And she's an
Mhm.
empathetic listener. She's very good at that. And that's something I've had to train myself on. So, Jan, you're an awesome leader. You're an awesome colleague. You're a great scientist,
Oh
great
gosh,
entrepreneur.
thank you.
So good job. And excellent tools. And you create excellent tools for my laboratory as well. And so you've described a little bit about your company. You described entrepreneurship. You described what you guys have done, how we met. Describe during this COVID-19 quarantine shutdown how important these tools that are available on the cloud for remote lab operations and for people to access from home. Because, just to give you guys an idea, most of the pharmaceutical and biotech companies, they're, let's see, they're in survival furlough mode right now. They're not a lot of people on site, and they're trying to do as many things as virtual and as at home as possible. Would you agree with that, Jan?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So it's definitely disrupted the industry. Okay. But still, things have to get done. And I can say without without the tools that like Jan has created, these things would be very, very difficult to do from home because you would have to be on site to do most of them or to be at least a little bit more productive. And so, Jan, describe the tools that you created with Metrendalytics. Why has that been so important in this remote quarantine environment?
Yeah, absolutely. But first, let's take a step back with COVID-19 specifically, and those who were following the economy, let's say. You saw so much, you saw how fragile it was from, the repo market, the, countless printing of money, the inverted yield curves, the unsubstantiated debt, and you knew that any black swan event was going to tip it over. And COVID-19 was that black swan event. But on a positive note, I think it's also an accelerator for technology because it's going to force companies to innovate because it's the companies that can do things better, faster, cheaper, more productive, more creative, and problem solving. These are the companies that are going to leapfrog to the forefront. And having remote access to your business operations becomes so critical, and it's very apparent right now that and I know a lot of people thinks that this is just a temporary thing, but I think not. I mean, this is going to change the landscape.
Yeah.
Oops, sorry.
I can still hear you. It's all good.
Oh, okay. I cut out. So I think this is going to change the landscape forever of operations because companies are going to see that their employees are very productive working from home.
Yeah.
Probably even more so, they could begin thinking about, all the cost savings and rental and what other hidden costs there is in housing an employee. And on the employee side, just as well, in this New York, New Jersey area, it's typical to commute an hour a day to work. So think of all that time spent saved and communicate and those costs and and wear and tear on your car. So I think this is going to be, the mindset moving forward to be able to work from home.
Well,
And
optimism. I spoke about that a couple of weeks ago on my show, and optimism is knowing no matter the outcome, something good will become of it. And I think you're right, Jan, that this is very disruptive. And I agree, though, that there's going to be some things that come of it, including what you're talking about, remote operations and security of your IT systems and all those things that people have to shore up. And also just a working environment. And maybe I don't always like this term, but a work-life balance for
Right.
people where you can work from home. And
Mhm.
think about the costs that you could save from your laboratory space or your building space, or your business space, because you don't, like you say, you don't have to house those employees. And so I think it's great, and you've been a big part of that. So really, really good job. And so that's been awesome. So can you give us an example of, maybe if you can talk about it? I know, no specifics about who you work with or anything like that. We don't want to share confidential information, but can you give a high level example of some examples of the products and service that you provided on a cloud for remote operations and for handling all this data in one place, and how that's worked for a specific example?
Yeah, so I mean, just the fact of having a centralized place of all the projects and the commitment timelines that are up and coming and tasks to complete that is essential. And now as laboratories are moved to more shift schedules, our scheduling tools are pretty dynamic in that environment to be able to see, keep social distancing, but have enough scientists there to do the jobs and the scheduling of equipment and having time to decontaminate equipment in between those runs. So, I mean, all the standard handoffs that were part of the lab, as I bring my data packet to person, the next person who brings it to the next person, that all those types of things have been eliminated, and reports or requests are surfaced up through the application. You could pull it up on your smartphone. I could approve of an inquiry through my phone. It goes then to the next workflow, and you don't skip a beat when you have that type of environment.
Yeah.
So there's been many things.
I
And
want to,
especially one more thing I want to bring up with like a lot of now pharma is in a situation that they have to outsource more and more of the laboratory work, and they're asking for FTE arrangements because we need to put a bucket work. And we have we have the ability to forecast that type of thing. So how many people would you need by how many scientists, how many QA, QC people to support that FTE model is, another thing that our system provides, and it has been great data for companies, responding to COVID.
yeah, it definitely, and productivity is very important. I mean, one of the metrics that companies use is very typical in all of our industry and other industries as well. Is, for example, revenue per employee,
Yeah,
profit per employee. You have to deal with those things to know how productive you actually are. Revenue per instrument. That's another very common thing that our industry deals with, because our instrumentation is very expensive. One instrument, for example, I don't want to get into too many of the terms, but a mass spectrometer can cost $300, $400, $500,000. And so to make sure you get a return on investment in that is very, very important. And so, one of I remember when Jan was making some of these applications, and she was talking to me about them, and we were presenting on them and whatnot. And this is in one of my presentations, actually, that I presented. But it's like I showed a screenshot of my smartphone and showing all this information on my phone that I could access through her applications. And I'm like, seriously? Yes, we're finally in 2020. We're finally in 2019. Because I
absolutely.
yeah, I thought the ways of doing things were so antiquated. That's what,
Mhm.
we're still hand entering stuff and
Mhm.
these spreadsheets, and it's like, come on, Microsoft Excel has been around since 1983, and we're
And you're
still
entering the same information over and over and over again. And it's been
and
a
you have
pleasure to see your laboratory, how it's grown. And, off of the foundation of this platform, really, in terms of the amount of samples that you're able to process and the revenue. It's been 4 years since the implementation, and it's been quite impressive.
well, yeah, certainly, and that we've talked about that.
Yeah.
productivity and stuff. I had an interview in Bioanalysis Zone, and we had a presentation as well. So it's kudos to you, Jan. So thank you very, very much. And so, we're going to move on to a topic that you've done a great job of creating tools to make our laboratories in our industry more productive. And I'm thankful for that. You're a great entrepreneur. I love your leadership stories. I love your entrepreneurial story, your science stories. We're going to be moving on to something that is very interesting, and Jan's very passionate about it. And it's blockchain currency. And and we'll heard, I don't know if I'm going to use the right terms here, Jan, is another term for it cryptocurrency?
Oh, cryptocurrency. Bitcoin is, one.
Yeah, and Bitcoin's an example. Yeah, Bitcoin's an example. And she educated me on it. And I'm a very conservative investor. Yes, I started my own business. It's been a very good investment for me. And I started several other businesses, but cryptocurrency, I don't really understand it. I still don't. But Jan has some great stories about this. And so one of the things that she talked about is how this will improve healthcare and reduce healthcare costs. And she started explaining to me, I'm like, wow, that's incredible. Yes, that's absolutely possible. So Jan, can you kind of explain cryptocurrency?
Yeah. So
and then we'll start on explain cryptocurrency and then how it can improve healthcare costs. That'll be the second follow-up.
Yeah, so I first got interested in 2017, and I don't know if you heard, there was like so much buzz on the media about Bitcoin raising to new heights of $20,000. And I was like, what is this Bitcoin? What is cryptocurrency? I had no idea.
You can buy it or it's traded or something, right?
Yeah, you could buy it. And
20,000.
So it was more of a investment proposition at first, but then I, read the white paper and I was like completely blown away. This is brilliance, right? And to think about the underlying technology. So Bitcoin is an asset, a financial asset on the blockchain, and Bitcoin is the most secure, the first blockchain that has been invented. But then when I started studying more about the blockchain and what it does, it's a distributed ledger that tracks anything of value, and it tracks it in a cryptographic security. And that data cannot be changed. It's immutable. It's secure, and each transaction is validated through very sophisticated computer algorithms. So, and also you have the ability to add on smart contracts. That's like business rules. Think of it as business rules on top of this tracking device. Yeah, wow. That is transparent, it's secure, it has trust. So you're bypassing that whole third-party reviewer. So I began thinking, oh my God, this is going to revolutionize most businesses, because when you think of all the transactions that we have as part of business operations and producing data, all the data is constantly checked, right? We have checkers everywhere. And if you look at the cost of the clinical trials in terms of monitors and QA and QC, I mean, all that goes away, essentially. It will be very disruptive technology for most businesses, because you don't need the fact checkers anymore. It's there on the blockchain. And we're always talking about how to reduce costs of drug development. Well, yeah, using this technology, definitely. And, so I began thinking about, oh my gosh, we could use it, already there's been very successful applications in using it for patient records, medical records, also supply chain, but, just thinking about the whole clinical process from patient consent, protocol, the, site contracts, even having an EDC built on the blockchain. EDC is that collects the clinical data, electronic data capture, and it would be really very revolutionary. So I began talking about it to people in the industry, and there was a lot of buzz and there's a lot of talk, yeah. But no action really. I mean, we're very risk averse and very conservative as an industry. Yeah. And although I was so passionate about it, I didn't think I was going to see this happening in pharma in my career, right? But I I bet that we would see tons of applications of blockchain across different industries in the next 10 years. I think that would be the foundation. So I began then further studying of what is the value of Bitcoin? What is that value proposition? Because I didn't really quite understand it. For me, I thought we had sound money. I thought we had banks that were good custodians of our money. And we're seeing how that thesis has unraveled during these times. And so I fell way down the rabbit hole, understanding more about the central banks, the quantitative easing, the risk, how we're inflating our dollar, and what the benefits of Bitcoin are. And in these times of geopolitical unrest, historically, we've gone to safe havens such as real estate and precious metal to secure our wealth. And now there's a new asset to look into, such as Bitcoin, as a deflationary hedge protection for your wealth. And if you look over the last 10 years, it's been the best performing asset. If somebody, a person that got into Bitcoin as an investment just a year and a half ago would have tripled their investment now. So these are amazing figures. And I think it's the money of the future. Is it going to be a painful path to get there? Is it highly volatile? It's highly volatile. You have to have stomach of steel. We get, highly volatile ups and downs of evaluation, but that's because it's a new and evolving asset that's coming to market. So it's quite exciting for me. I'm very much involved in the community, and it's a lot of like-minded people like us, right, that believe in the same thing. So, and the most brilliant people I've ever met in my life.
Well, it's interesting, and she's still educating me on this. So thank you very much, Jan. I'm understanding more and more of it. But what really made my ears perk up yesterday when she was talking about this is, in a year and a half, you can triple your investment. And now I realize there's volatility in that. Don't get me wrong. I realize that, you're going to have the highs with the lows. However, what I think most of us realize, I don't care your age, is that the way the government is printing money now and just making it available is it's not worth as much. It's just not. And it's really, it makes me fearful, especially for my children, that there's not going to be as much for them either.
Exactly.
Just because there's so much debt, and it's tens of thousands of dollars per person that the government is putting debt on every child that's born. And so that's just so the more they print money, any government, the more valuable Bitcoin becomes. And
yeah. So it's going through the exact opposite where, with money, we're seeing quantitative easing and a printing of money. Yeah. So Monday was the Bitcoin halving. And what does that mean? So it's devaluating, it's quantitative hardening. So the amount of block rewards are cut in half. So the scarcity is getting more scarce as an asset. So you have one hand, the economy crumbling, and you have an asset that's a hedge that's getting even more scarce. So this really presents for a very bullish, case for Bitcoin.
I guess maybe the only competitor, is this true, is that there could be another type of currency that would compete with them?
Well, there's lots of cryptocurrencies.
So,
there's always 5,000, but yeah, you could have, I'm sure that we'll come out with some sort of centralized digital currency, which is different from a cryptocurrency. So, if our dollar collapses and we move to a new currency, it could be some Fed coin or dollar coin, but it is centralized. It could be backed. It could be backed by hard metal such as gold, and so that might be better. But it's still centralized. So Bitcoin is completely decentralized.
Yeah, very interesting. Well, I think that's a good thing. I think that really is. Yeah. That's good for the economy. I think it's more real. It's more real on what is actually occurring. So I can't wait to learn more about that study, and maybe we'll have you back on another show to really get into.
Yeah, that's a podcast in itself because there's lots of things to talk about, and how to buy it, how to secure it, and lots of great things because you're your own bank now. You completely bypass any central authority.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, we have a caller. I think they have some cryptocurrency questions. So let me tell them to call back, and we'll get this caller, um, and we'll answer this call. I don't have my producer with me. My producer is usually my son, and he does an awesome job. So I'm trying to answer calls and actually do the show as well. But we'll have a caller here in just a minute. Here we go.
Needham.
Hello, caller. Can you hear us? Let's see. I'm going to get him on the line. 1 second. Caller, can you hear us?
Money. Can Jan?
Caller?
I can.
Okay, so
thank you for taking my call.
Yeah, so Jan, we have let's see, it looks like Sean on line 1. Sean, what's your questions for Jan?
So Jan, it sounds like you're kind of knowledgeable about the Federal Reserve and maybe fiat money and kind of how inflation is going to be driven out of control. Is that correct?
Well, sort of. I'm not an economist, but I try to follow it.
Well, it sounds like you know more than most Americans, just knowing that a central bank is trying to control our entire country.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm curious about this Bitcoin thing. I mean, I'll be honest with you, I've been skeptical.
Mm-hmm.
And I was wondering how, because I know there's people that will set up computers like server rooms in a warehouse to mine Bitcoin, and they have these computers that are mining Bitcoin. Do you know much about that?
Yeah. So there's so that's part of the Bitcoin is very much like gold in that you have to mine it, and there's ASIC miners that are producing Bitcoin each and every day, and this halving is producing half of the amount each day. So that's the one thing with the scarcity. But in terms of an investment, you don't have to have computers to generate that Bitcoin and mine it. You could go onto an exchange and purchase it directly. And you don't even have to buy a full Bitcoin. You could buy a fractional part of a Bitcoin. So you can invest as little as $50. And, to me, it's just, diversifying, right? You have some diversification of your portfolio. So you could be invested in stocks and, precious metals, bonds, and some cryptocurrency, Bitcoin specifically.
So what is it? You have a good question, caller. And so why do they have to mine it? I don't really understand that.
So it's I don't really understand the computational algorithm behind it, but it takes effort to generate a Bitcoin. And it's sort of like a mining, and anything of value takes effort to gain.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah. Well, we know it's probably better than quantitative easing, or like you say, it's at least another investment. Does that answer your question, caller?
It does. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for the call. So that was our caller. You did a great job. And so excellent. That was actually my brother. Actually, he said he was trying to call. I saw the Facebook post. And so anyway, I have a twin brother. His name's Sean. And so he's
really?
Yeah.
Sean and Shane?
Yeah.
Wow.
And he owns a pharmacy. And so we have a lot in common. So he's like a scientist and entrepreneur as well. And so anyway, that was great. I still don't understand it all. And it sounds like a lot of us don't. But like you say, it's just another diversification for your investment. And I agree with that too. And so that's wonderful. So we're getting ready to wrap it up here, Jan. You've been just a fabulous guest, and I can't wait to have more scientists and entrepreneurs on the show in the coming future.
Thank you so much. It's been so much fun.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things that we always kind of wrap up the show with is, I'm a type of person, and I think you have this type of a mindset too. We were talking yesterday, and just getting to know you over the last few years, is that everything happens for a reason. I love that term. A great friend of mine always reminds me of that. And everything happens for a reason. So I don't really believe in failures, so to speak. I believe in everything happens for a reason, and you get back up, dust yourself off, and something good becomes of that. And so but I like to have people give me a reason for a apparent failure where you thought it might have been a failure, or maybe somebody externally looking up on your life would say that it was a failure, but it actually turned out to be a success in the end. Can you describe an example like that?
Yeah. I mean, there's so many, right? When you think back at your life, what you perceived as being failures at the time. And yeah, I could think of many situations, but to me, if you're not failing, that means you're not at the edge, you're not innovating, you're not taking risks, right? So at the time, I could see events that happened to me that I thought were failures. And I asked myself, did I not play the right politics? Did I not align myself with the right people? Did I put too much trust in the leadership that they had my best interests? And I failed in those aspects. And, maybe it's a downsizing, maybe I got hooked by a layoff, so I felt that was a failure. But, every failure, now I look back at my life, which I thought was the opening of a new door and great opportunities ahead. So I don't see anything as a failure. It's just a change in direction of life.
Yeah.
And something to learn and to grow and evolve.
Wow. We have a couple of great 1-minute clips that you've just provided for this whole show of just summing up your mindset. It's going to be great. I can't wait. This has been, Jan, this has been really, really wonderful. I love your mindset, your entrepreneurial spirit, your passion about so many things, your scientific knowledge. I really, really like it. And, when I can get on an airplane again, I was thinking this actually, and I asked Jan earlier before we went live, she hasn't flown probably since the quarantine, I'm assuming, correct?
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. And neither have I. And so I haven't flown since late February. And usually I would at least have a couple of flights a month. And that was a really not busy month. I haven't been on an airplane since, I think, early February, right?
Yeah.
I haven't been grounded, so to speak, in that long in 20 years. I actually a little bit feel like a rat in a cage right now.
So do you have any fear to go back onto a plane? That's the question. No.
Zero. I have zero fear. I mean, this is just me. I'm a healthy guy. I have a healthy metabolome. I have a healthy metabolic system. The numbers are very clear that 75% of the people that are dying from COVID are really, really old and have metabolic disorders. I have none of that. Yeah. And so I'm just not afraid at all. I am more worried that some of these airlines won't exist. Yeah. Some of the big ones won't exist after we get done with this. Yeah. I've seen airports and how empty they are. I've seen that their flights have been reduced by 80%. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure how businesses recover from that. Mm-hmm. And that makes me sad. That's my biggest fear. So, yeah. But are you afraid of getting on an airplane?
No, I'm not. And I really don't have any COVID fear as well. And I don't understand that. Maybe it's just blocking it out of my mind, which is probably the best thing to do. Right?
It probably is. Because you know why? We can't control it.
Yeah, we can't control it. And I'm right here, dipped in the epicenter each and every day.
And you're dipped in the epicenter. And by the way, you look really healthy and lively. So you're still alive. There's no problem there. So, and I just know you're a grateful person as well. So, Jan, this has been a wonderful show. So we're wrapping up this podcast. Join us next week. We'll advertise about that, but go find me on Facebook. Go find me on LinkedIn. Go find me on Instagram. Follow all my podcasts on Spotify, on SoundCloud, on YouTube, and on iTunes as well. And so we have many different platforms to follow. Get on my website, drsneedham.com, where you have all that information I just described and some other information as well. And Jan has been a great example of really, I call the podcast Secrets of Success. What you have probably figured out through all my guests on the podcast, and Jan is one of them, is there is no secret to success. It's a mindset of never be outworked, period.
Yeah.
And there is, she said it herself, there is no failure. I love that. And so she has that great work ethic and that never be outworked example. And so thanks for being a guest. And Jan, when I can get on an airplane, we got to see each other.
Get together. Yeah.
I can't wait. And so anyway, Jan, you've been great. Thank you very much. You have a great week.
You too. You too. Thanks again. So much fun.
Yeah, we'll be in touch. You did a great job. Thank you.